Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I will introduce myself, although I've been introduced. My name is José Luis. I come from Alicante. I am an IT system technical engineer and hardworking voice over the internet. I leave my contact details for you, just in case you have further questions after my presentation. My presentation is about analyzing a hardware device. This is a talk about hacking embedded devices. This is a router for voice over the internet, but this is not for voice over the internet, but this could be applied to any device. Do you know what VoIP is? Well, VoIP is telephony over the internet. It doesn't go through a physical cable or wire, but it goes through data. It goes through a data network, and the same as any other service, it needs to be protected in the same fashion. I do VoIP, and what are the problems that I often find in security? Is it the same being attacked on your VoIP system or your database? No, we are not talking about the same consequences. If someone attacks a website, it's often done for lift the ego or to have a good time or just to steal data. But when this system is being hacked, is being attacked, voice over the internet is done for to get financial reward out of it. So I don't know whether here there are some administrators. I don't know whether you know about the firewall that you have in your system. You will see that there are blocks every minute. I set up a honeypot so that to find out about the type of messages and that I was getting. It was a VoIP honeypots, and in 6 months I received more than 3 million queries, and I didn't publish it anywhere. And what is the solution that we have to protect our system? Is it enough to have good administration? Well, if there are administrators in the room, you know that systems have to be updated all the time, but this is not always easy. At the level of VoIP, well, I'm saying this for VoIP, this could be applicable to any other system. Probably you don't have only one machine, but you will have an infrastructure of several machines. If you analyze one of them, probably you will have to make changes in the configuration, or perhaps you have machines with different services that also want to upgrade. So probably this is not an easy task, and well, on a daily basis we get new failures and new attacks. A good solution though would be to install a firewall, but a firewall which is well aware of VoIP, knowledgeable about VoIP. Going back to a website, you either open or shut a service. If you want everyone to access your website, you cannot really introduce IP filters. The same goes here. If you want everyone to use your service, you open it up to everyone. How do you filter that though? If you have a device able to analyze the entry, whatever enters into your network, that would be ideal. And this is what my talk is about. Today we will be analyzing one of those devices. It is a router that monitors VoIP traffic and in theory looks at whether it is a threat or whether it is a legit package. And we will take a look at the functionality, and then we will see whether it meets the manufacturer's requirements. And then let us also take a look at the response that we often get from the manufacturer every time we report failures. Well, if you notice this website, okay, the website for this device, it tells you that this device does all that. It analyzes SIP packages. It also detects abnormalities in the SIP protocol. It also blocks denial of service attacks, CSS, buffer overflow, known vulnerability. It also has dynamic blacklist, whitelist, geolocation. It detects frauds. It does everything. I didn't mention it, but I chose this device because the manufacturer contacted me to offer it to me for me to sell it, to distribute it, or offer it to my clients. And before I offer a product or a service to my clients, I want to analyze it to see if it is up to the standards. And looking at this device, well, I can tell you that it is manufactured by a company located in India. However, it is distributed by a Canadian company. Actually, this is the same company. However, let us say that they have two brands, so that the manufacturer can offer it to third parties who want to manufacture the product under a different brand name. If we take a look at this, take a look at the panel, we find different panels, different look and feel, different colors. The second device, it is well known, used by millions of users. I didn't use it myself. I cannot really certify 100% that it has the same failures. But I guess it is similar in terms of failures. If we take a look at the actual device, this is the one that of the manufacturer, the one that is manufactured, distributed by this other company, and then this other one, the same type of device, the same buttons, the same configuration, everything. How do we analyze the security of a physical device? And as I say, this can be applied to any device: router, telephones, cameras. So what it is most convenient to do, if we have access to the firmware, we will unzip it and then we will analyze it. However, the problem that we find here is that only few manufacturers offer you the possibility to download the firmware, and when you do that, often the firmware is encrypted. So therefore, that makes it difficult for us to go into it. And then we can also analyze devices through administration panels, whether it is web, SSH, telnet, etc. The problem is that we are just doing blind analysis here. So if we do penetration tests, we may do that, but we don't have the source code, we don't have access to the system, no nothing. So another way to analyze these hardware devices is through a console ports, if there are. If they are available, and if they are not available, we go through UART or GTAG ports. Problems: if there is no console port for us to plug in, we will have to open up the device. That means that we will be not complying or with the warranty. We break the warranty, and here you see a UART connection where we just plug in 3 or 4 wires and we connect it to the USB. And then in case of this device that we'll be talking about, we don't have fully access to it. In the manufacturer website, we might download updates, but often they are encrypted and we cannot do anything with them. And then for that, okay, we decided to pen test it. And I did a switch. I used a switch to create a local network, and then VoIP a switch board, and then mobile phone just to launch the attacks, and then the actual device. How does it work? Well, this device works in bridge mode. So there are two interfaces. There is a LAN. There are two LANs. So we will connect the switchboard or the VoIP system to the LAN, and then all the traffic going in and out the switchboard will go through this device, and then the device will decide whether the package is malicious or valid or legit. So before that, let us analyze the functionality and everything that is being sold by the manufacturer. So let us take a look at this panel web. It is very easy to manage. There are a number of checkboxes that you have to follow. You don't need to know how to program or anything else. And what I disliked was that by default it comes with two interfaces. So the LAN and WAN, and actually only the LAN administrations are open. So if we allow it to access through the LAN, and if we connect it to the internet, well, this could be an attack vector, actually. So this is not very inspiring in terms of trust. Here we see SQL injection. This would allow us to change things in the database. We also have failures in terms of scripting. We could use it to do a phishing attack. And then if we access through the SSH, we see a menu menu of options, which is quite reduced. We don't have the possibility to execute a command interface. The only thing that we can do is what it says in the screen, and if we do an exit, then it does not allow us to do it. So apparently, if we access through SSH, we go to this menu, we do for three things, and then when we do exit, we are no longer there. So therefore, this is not a good way to going. So to analyze functionality, because this is a VoIP device, I'm going to use CyberVicious. CyberVicious is one of the most well-known tools to pen test these systems. It is a set of scripts that are programmed on Python. They scan networks to look for VoIP systems. Once any systems are found, then they number the telephony extensions, and passwords can also be cracked. So I'm going to launch this app, trying to locate switchboards. And here we can see that it does not find anything. If we go to the panel web, control panel, here we see two alerts. One alert telling us that an attack has been detected, and another one when our IP is blocked, because it considers that we are a threat. If we access to the blacklist, our IP is listed on that blacklist. And here we cannot do anything in the device. And this is what this device is thought for. And why is this happening? This protocol is very similar to HTTP. CyberVicious sends out a message. What is the difference between a message sent by CyberVicious and a phone? Well, if we analyze the message, and as I say, it's very similar to HTTP, so here we see a user agent, and in this case is Fidel Scanner, and this is by default in CyberVicious, and this is the first thing that has to be blocked. As I remind you that CyberVicious is programmed in Python. If it is programmed in Python, you have access to the source code. And then if you have access, you can change the agent. And what happens if we change the user agent and we repeat the agent? Well, we launch vmap again, and this time we can see that the switchboard is detected. And once we have the switchboard, if we take a look at these extensions, we can see that the extensions are also found. Well, this time there is only one extension 200. And here we can locate, or we can scan the servers, and well, just by using a user agent which is not known. As you see, the device is not aware, has not found us, and no alerts have been created. If we launch the cracking of passwords through brute force, it will block us because it will interpret it as a denial of service attack. However, when it comes to VoIP attacks, even if there is an attempt to crack passwords through brute force, this is not that much used. It is a remote attack, leaves lots of logs, and it is easily blocked. But actually, when it comes to telephony fraud, there is an attempt to do telephonies without authentication. If when we get a query call, if we do not ask the user to authenticate itself, the telephony will go through, and therefore we will lose money. If we try whether the device is blocking that or not, there are many tools to do it, many tools for this type of fraud. I programmed a script, and through that script I will send out a call query to the switchboard, and I will say that I am user 200, And this is the IP of the switchboard, and I will ask it to call that telephone number. And then when I send out the package, I can see that it returns a try. So it means that it's trying it. The call has not been denied, it has not been rejected because they have a local environment. The And then again, the device is not aware of what I didn't notice what I did. So here, fingerprinting and the numbering of users, we skipped it. We just use a username which is not known. And then the DOS, I will put a question mark. I will tell you more about it. And then scripting, well, there are some problems there. And then in terms of fraud detection, I just made a phone call and the word dialing. I made a phone call and then the device was not aware of it, did not detect it. So now you can draw your own conclusions about it. And now let us analyze the security of the actual device and starting off with SSH panel. So we saw before that the menu was quite reduced and we couldn't really do very many things. And out of all these options, do you think that the manufacturer has implemented an application doing all that? If he were to do that, that would be reinventing the wheel. The system does all that. So we assume that they execute the system command for downloading firmware or for changing a password, you name it. And now the doubt is, out of all these commands, those that ask you to introduce a parameter, those parameters were filtered? Well, let us take a look at it. So we access through SSH and we are going to try some of those parameters that ask for commands that ask for a parameter. If we launch a pin and instead of writing an IP address, we just write down slash asterisk, it is doing a directory of the root. And here we can just get a list of all the files in the system. It is a bit tedious, but we can reconstruct all the files in the system by using a command which has not been properly filtered. And what do you think that is behind this command for downloading firmware? If instead of writing a URL, if we write down minus minus help, okay, we see that this is wget. Wget, it's an application which gives us lots of room. So instead of saying that we want to download URL, we say that we want to download a set of URLs that are included in a file. We do that through minus input file. It takes the file that we gave it. It tries to read each of the lines and thinking that it is a valid URL. And then with that error, we get the full line. It is a bit tedious, but if we use the null parsing or the bad parsing of command, we can reconstruct the file system and we can end up reading any file in the system. Well, this is very interesting. We can play around with it. But actually, SCP is not being filtered, so therefore we can download it. We can fully download it to our machine and to take our time to analyze it. When it comes to the web panel, there are some commands here that I believe that are also interacting with the operating system, whether it is the ping command or route command. And here ping accepts two parameter, which is the host and the con. And are they well filtered? If these parameters are not being filtered, we will be able to filter system commands. For that, we will help use boot, which is a proxy, and we will try to inject it in the host parameter. We will not be seeing a response of what we are doing because these commands will be executed in the background. The web will not display the result. If you really want to do that, you can do a reboot. If you see that your machine or the device reboots, means that it has found a command injection. So, but if it does not reboot, if it does not upload, here we can see that we can execute commands by executing in the host parameter of ping. And, well, what about reading the answer? Well, if we enter anything, it will run in the background and we don't know what is happening. We cannot see what is happening. To execute the response, there are two things that we can do. We can read files with wget and we can ask it to send it to a machine where from where we can listen. That is to say, we start the netcap in our computer in the port 80, like if we were a web server, and then we will inject wget through the parameter minus minus pot file. We will ask it to read a file system, and then we will ask it to send it out to our IP address. In this case, I get the DC password, and then we ask it to send out the output to our IP address. If we look at it later on our console, here we will have the file output. Well, it continues to be a bit tedious, and to make it a bit more automatic, we will repeat the process doing a recursive process so that we can find the root of the web. We execute the commands, we redirect the output to a file, and then we will download it with a wget. And for that, I create a script. Then I give two parameters to it. First of all, the command that I want to execute, and the second one, 0 or 1, depending on whether I am expecting I want it to give me a response or not. Script is very simple. What I do is log in to get the cookie, then I execute curl to inject in ping, which is the vulnerable file. If I expect output, I do another one for the output, and then I do a logout. It will be as easy as this. This is much faster, much more convenient. When we access through SSH, we got a menu, but who starts that menu? So here we can see that the menu is started here. This is an app mainly, and if we rename the file, by the time we will access through SSH, that mainly will not be executed, and therefore we will have access to the commands interface. That's what we want to get at, to play around with it. We rename it, then we access through SSH, and then we gain access to the whole system. Could be that SSH is not enabled in this device. If SSH is disabled, we can enable it just by changing one of the values in the database and then by executing a command. Because we can execute command through the web panel, we can do that with no problem. And if we do not know the access password to access through SSH, well, same thing. If you have access to the command interface, we can create our own personalized user as root and then to access through it. And now, out of curiosity, I'll tell you what happens if perhaps for other devices. And what happens if you are in a device where you cannot access through SSH? How do you gain access to the console? So first of all, it will be a question of taking a look at the architecture of the device. And here we can compile a netcat for this architecture. unless it is already available in the system, but this is not the case. So therefore, I download a netcat for it, I compile it in my machine, and then I upload it. So to try it on that device, in this case, there are very many firewall rules that is blocking the connection. Then I will take advantage of the script that I have to run the commands through the web panel. I'm going to delete all the firewall rules. We delete the entry, exits, rules. We check that all the rules have been deleted, that everything is clean, and then we use wget to download netcats. So we connect it with our machine, the binary is downloaded, then we will give it run permissions, and then we run it. I run it on port 5001, and then from my machine I will do netcat to that port, therefore then will get into the system. That's the way you do it when you do not have SSH access. Well, here you see that we have different ways to access to the device, different ways to do it through the web, through SSH. Once we are in, if we analyze the database, oh sorry, excuse me, if we analyze the website, we can see the failure of SQL injection that we saw in the beginning. As you can see, this is using the main parameter, which is the user, and it is introducing it right away in SQL without making any parsing, with no parsing. Therefore, well, that's what it is explained in the manuals. And then we can also take a look at the authentication file, and then from there we end up in a database. So you may notice that database can be accessed from the web. Well, we guess that there are something there, so that I just don't go there, I just type in the URL and then fully download the database. No, that's not the way it is. I don't need to authenticate myself, I just enter the URL and then I download the database. And the database includes the user hash to access, but this is not the worst. I wouldn't even have to crack that password. If we take a look at it, we see that from the index to the login in the authentication process, it is sends out the password, the user in clear, and then it is also sending out a hash, and the hash is the password that has already been generated. And if we notice in the source code, we see that it checks, it tries to match the hash that I am sending out with the hash on the database. So the usual thing is that I send the username, the password, and that matches it with that of the database, but this time it is matching it with the hashtag that I have right from the index. Imagine that I found this device up there, I don't know what is the password, I just enter whatever, for instance an X letter, and if I try to log in, they're going to say, well, wrong credentials. So far so good. And because I know which is the route to get to the database, I just upload it and download it. I download the database on my machine, and it will not be asking me, will not ask me for any authentication. Once I download the database, we go to the web user table, and then we find the admin user and then the password, then 5, and then we copy that password. We go back to the website, and then we repeat the authentication process. Again, to authenticate myself, I enter any password because I don't know the right password. I just enter X, and then when we have this hash, I cut, I paste the one that I had in the database, and this takes me right into the panel. I didn't even have to crack the password.
What I mean is, just summarizing, I find one of these things around, I download the database, I work with it, I have access to the dashboard with M5, no need to crack it. And there you got a command injection through, I don't know, the pin side. Once I have it, I can build my own user name with admin privileges. I remove the extension and I have the dashboard and can do anything I want.
Bueno, pues analizando otros servicios que hay en este aparatito, me llamó la atención.
Using a few more things, well, I found this very interesting. It was an 88 UDP port.
Bueno, me puse a ver quién arranca ese puerto.
I started looking around and see who was working with it, and this is started by STMI InfoServe, which is proprietary by the manufacturer, and I use IDA to check out what it would do, and you can see it is waiting for some package to be there, and depending on what you send, it will do one thing or the next. So this is what it does. It's sniffing, and the minute we send something to that UDP port, it throws back the local interface data. No need to authenticate ourselves, and just like that we can know what the network address can be. But if we throw set, it keeps waiting for us to send another package, and if we set IP slash and network mask and then address, we will change the device address. No need to authenticate ourselves or anything of the kind. Allegedly, I say, because it doesn't work. I've tried it, and this thing, it would stop the network device, it changes the address that I use, but then it doesn't start. It's dead, and you know what that means. And so, as we said before with the features, you see denial of service can be crossed out because just one package and it's offline. So what else? Once we have access to it, what else can we do? So, MindClean. You remember this app? That's when we gain access through or via SSH. So the starting script for this, if you check it out, there is something quite funny. And it would be this thing here. So we send help, and that's not there. And if we see that that's what it does, and it's up there, you see there's a binary run 6 login. If it returns 0, it would be a command interface. Otherwise, it says credentials are wrong. And as a matter of fact, if we try it, even if we see 6 login, it's not in the help text, it is there. So this is a device that cost us $200. Again, IDA, see what it does, and we see it's quite simple app. Asking for the password, and then what it does is check out the password against a hash that it's hard-coded, copied into the binary. This SH1 sensalt, and with this table you just crack the password. It is all small letters, it's 9 small letters. And so this is a device, and you have a command interface like root that we cannot block, we cannot change the password. Well, at least they should go for a robuster password, shouldn't they? And if we try it out, we will see that it works, it does work. Once we have access to the whole device, we can also see how the firmware is encrypted. So let me remind you, since from MindClean we could have a firmware update, and that is because there is encryption software. And so we go to the file and we check out everything that we need. We just replace it and we can have our own copy. And what's the point of it all? Well, this way we can update a firmware update. We can have our own customized firmware with the present inside, so to say, encrypted with the manufacturer's keys, and we can have a beautiful botnet network, for example. After finding out about it all, well, it was quite entertaining because many things can be done, as a matter of fact. Since the manufacturer had given me the device for free, I think it would be advisable to let them know what was going on. So I contacted them to let them know if they were interested in a summary. They said yes, and mid-July this year, I sent all the fails that I found, all the bugs, and I suggested a security audit urgently. The reply was, thank you very much for the notice, my notice. They would look into it, and who knows, maybe they would do it. And a month later, the manufacturer contacted me back and said that they've repaired it all, that they would send me new devices. That would be the version 2.0. And I think it is an insult, not for me, but for the users who've spent the money. Such a large company cannot afford a security audit, and they want me to look into it free of charge again. Since it is free of charge, I said, yes, okay, send it to me. And a month later, I got the device all the way from India. First sight, you see it's a new box, a shell, a bit more compact. It's moved to ARM. I don't really understand why this has an unstable distribution taken into account the device it is. And so I go online, and 10 minutes later I send this a snapshot back to the manufacturer. It took me only 10 minutes to reroute it again. Again, I say, go for a security audit, this is shameful, but they do not feel like using money, and they only interested in knowing how I cracked in this time around. Same as before, same place, different parameters. I say, you've got a command injection on the host parameters, so check them as well, because if you've done just the same, you know, so this, everything else had been solved. They were line per line and patched it all. Problem is, this, well, you see, I found another command injection, but I cannot have access to the dashboard without a password. And I cannot download the database either. But I looked deeper into the device, and as it happens, on the website, there are parts where the session variable is not checked, so we can run part of the website without being authenticated. And funny is that the backup file for the user database does not check the session variable. So, get it, and I can download the encrypted database for users. It is encrypted, but the encryption codes are the same as with the previous device. So, you see, I downloaded, and once again, I have the database for the whole device. This time around, I will need to crack the password, but it is all a matter of time, and taking into account the kind of passwords they use, it won't take me long. If we take a few more files on the website, we see there are a few more that do not check the session variable. And for this kind of devices, they only take one admin, right? There cannot be two people connected to the switchboard at the same time. And this is a file for the user and doesn't check the session variable either. So if we run this, we can kick out any user that is connected. And if I put it into a loop, you know what it happens. More files that do not check the session variable. This is the one download of the whole system configuration or setup, all the alert warnings in the device. And if we go deeper into the web switchboard, you see there are a few more places where there is an interaction with the system. Like this, we can change the host name. I don't know what for, because we are not supposed to have access to the switchboard or anything else, dashboard, sorry, or anything else. But, well, there it is. As it's all programmed the same way, since we had command injection before, we will still have it. And The host name is something that changes when we reboot the device. What could happen if I were to inject a reboot into a command that is running when there is a reboot going on? What do you think will happen? The device moves into a restarting loop and I had to reset it all. I had to reflash it. I actually suspected it and I had a firmware backup. Otherwise, I would be using the device as a paperweight because the manufacturer does not give you the whole firmware. But, well, quite a disaster. Problem here is that there is a new version developed. Now they've changed the architecture. I don't really know why. But what about those customers that have first version? Will this all be sorted out? I don't think so. Because if in August everything was already sorted out according to what they said, and we see that for the last update, the date is January, that means that they didn't take the time to correct the problem I mentioned. Honestly, what I think happened is that when I sent them my warning with everything that I have found, they already had the second version ready. It was on beta stage. So they had their own device with the new architecture. Everything was new already. So they were about to release it, and with my warning email, well, that was perfect to correct a few things. That's all they did. They went line by line, prompt by prompt, trying to sort out all those things that I suggested. But it doesn't say that they will be patching the previous version, the old one. So conclusion, sometimes they're very good ideas. This one, I find it great. If I'm supposed to have a system that is open to everyone and I cannot filter IPs, but if I can control the whole traffic and I can say this is good, this is bad, or shield myself against attacks, that would be ideal. But we really need to analyze not just functionality and usability, but also the security of this device itself. This case, this is a device that is supposed to block out all the packages to my switchboard, and still it allows someone to have access to the whole device, to the command dashboard as a root, and once inside you have access to it all. There is nothing in between. You can monitor traffic, you can steal passwords and do anything you want. And I think I'm ahead of time, and well, still, that's been it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions.
Thanks. ¿Una pregunta?
Are there any questions? So, please. On purpose? What do you mean? On purpose. Yes, the back door, that's for sure. But these many mistakes, I don't think so. Actually, the second device I brought here, the orange one, I cannot certify whether it has any fails or bugs. There are already bugs for managing it. And I can say there are 1 million users already. And I've given this presentation on a voice IP presentation where the owner of the company was attending, and he, well, from South America, and just the same. There is, they are so passive. It's impressive. Any more questions? No more questions, so thank you very much to all of you.